Welcome back again, guys. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me. This time we're talking big stuff. We're talking Section 230 and a little bit of the First Amendment. My name is Tom. It's a pleasure to have you back. Stick around. So there was some stuff in the news recently. President Trump, at his usual antics and whatnot, talking about bringing up Section 230 again, which was something implemented about 20 years ago. And arguably, it is like people say it is the birth of the modern internet. And really what's happening is people are looking at this provision, which I'll read here in a second. Really, there's these 20 or 26 words that really everyone focuses on, which is: no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by any information content provider. So what this was saying is basically like what this said was people could basically post whatever they wanted, and these companies, i.e. Twitter and Facebook, wouldn't be liable for the things that are said. This stemmed from a couple of lawsuits, which I won't really get into, but it really just allowed information to travel as fast as it could, because people, you started these user-generated sites. Basically, it allowed just information to be passed along and conversations to ensue however they needed to be. And this is where, we start getting into the First Amendment things. That people can basically say whatever they want. Now, this was meant as a way to... It was originally meant for companies to sort of police this stuff themselves, content. Jeff Kosif, who's a cybersecurity law professor at the U.S. Naval Academy, said the idea behind 230 was that the platforms were much better suited to come up with the rules of the road than the government, which I don't disagree with. The issue we're having today, and where President Trump gets all upset, is that the Republicans claim to be unfairly affected by this section. And mainly, through Twitter, we've heard ad nauseum that conservative voices are censored on Twitter and also other social media platforms, Facebook. And while this really seems to work in favor of Trump, his following just grows and grows and grows. I would say, in my opinion, largely because he's the president. I think post Orange Man presidency, we would see a change in that. Again, that's just my opinion. I think because he's the president, he's offered a little bit of leeway in this regard. And Jack Dorsey, I believe, even said that in his podcast with Rogan, I believe 2 years ago now. So, but really we're getting in this sticky situation because what's happening now is that these companies are acting a lot like publishers. They're editing content and fact checking rather than just allowing the content to ensue. People just talk. And then, there's really they're not really drawing the line between publisher and platform in this particular section here, or in these particular words. But, when you have a publisher, like, any newspaper, they're selecting and they're hiring people based on the information that they want to push, message they want to send. Facebook and Twitter, they've always labeled themselves as the town square of the internet, the a place where people can meet and say what they need. But they're acting more as publishers. They're acting more like the New York Times or USA Today or Washington Post, because they are going in and saying, "Hey, we don't believe that this is right," and they've been wrong. They've been wrong about things. So they're really in a sticky situation, because most people are for the idea of free speech. They want to be able to say what they want to say, good or bad. I believe people should have that right, good or bad. You need to know the shitty ideas. You need to know the good ideas. Can't have dark without the light. Can't have the sweet without the sour. Right? I think we can all agree on that. But of course there are measures that need to be taken, correct? There's doxing, there's call to violence, call to actions that, can affect people's safety. Like, those are things that need to be dealt with swiftly. And, even though Twitter is a huge, huge platform, so many people on it every single day, it's basically a means of communication for everyone. It's like a very basic need almost at this point. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I think those particular items should be closely watched. I don't, people are doxing one another or calling for violence, like actual violence against a person, like physical violence, harm, stalking, etc. Like, that stuff needs to be dealt with, and people should be handled. But, just because you don't like someone's particular stance on something doesn't mean that they should be removed or silenced. In my own research over the past couple months, as I've talked about in previous videos, I've noticed that these things are popping up where there's a lot of conservative voices being silenced. There's not a lot of, liberal progressive people being silenced in the wake of all this. Which, I think there's things on both sides of the spectrum being flung around and said. And I think everyone should just be able to just say what they need to say. I don't think there's anything that egregious going on that, one side needs to be silenced over the other. I think, people are smart enough. There's without a doubt, there's a lot of stupid people out there, but I think people are smart enough to realize, like, what's right and what's wrong for the most part. But the people who don't need to be dealt with, just like in anything. Someone robs someone in broad daylight in the middle of town, they're going to get arrested. They should be arrested. I don't really know where it goes. I would say people need to use their head. I think people need to stop trying to police people's language. I think they need to start just letting people talk. The idea of hate speech. There's definitely hateful speech out there, that people say things that are not nice, and I think it stops about there. Especially when it comes to online communication. If someone says something online you don't like, ignore them, block them, mute them. No one. There's very few instances, in my opinion, that people need to be deplatformed over some dumb shit they said on the internet. As far as is Twitter stepping in and saying, labeling every single tweet out there that, oh, the election's been called this way, blah blah blah. Like, it's silly. It's silly that it's silly that they think that they need to do that. I think you're getting into a muddy, weird situation when you insert yourself into these public discussions. Granted, the Twitter platform is giant, right? It's huge. People equate it to the town square, but in the town square, you may reach a couple thousand at best. I'd say more likely a couple hundred if you're standing screaming in the town square. But on Twitter, you can reach 1 billion people. If you're lucky enough. we'll stay with easily thousands, but millions, possibly billions. It's a lot of people. Does that mean that people need to be silenced because they said that they think that the election is there's some sort of fraud going on in the election? No. Do they need to label it as, oh, well, the election's been called, so this may be misinformation? No, I don't think so. I think Section 230 is important, but I think there needs to be some specification, and it needs to be updated for the times. 20 years ago, the internet was not even close to what it is now, and I think Congress needs to take a long look at what this means and how it's being interpreted. I don't think the government should be overreaching into people's speech. I think Twitter and Facebook and all these social platforms are great, but to sacrifice someone's First Amendment rights to be able to just talk, to start policing language as violence, I think is really a slippery slope, because the people who are pushing for that now, I think you're going to regret it. I think that's something you're going to regret down the line. And that's a whole other discussion. Is Trump going to get his way if he kicks and screams? Probably not. He's the same as most of these petulant children screaming right now. Just how it is. But I think Section 230 is worth looking into and understanding for most people, because I think a lot of these hearings going on in Congress is showing us that these companies are getting a little big for their britches. I'm all for, people policing themselves and understanding like what should and should not be said, but there, in my opinion, there's very few things out there that really constitute for a company to step in and say, you quiet. I think deplatforming is a very slippery slope, and I don't think people realize that because they're not the ones, there's this big push to silence a lot of outspoken voices, but which is fine, but the pendulum does swing back the other way eventually, and then you're going to have their problems. We'll see. Thank you guys for joining this video. If you enjoy this kind of content, if you enjoy me talking about small political things of these natures, I enjoy it. But if you like it, make sure you like, comment, and if you're not already subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. I'll let you know every time a new video like this comes up. I appreciate your time. We'll see you guys next time.